the eastern shore is totally flat. It was probably the place to breed Africans in this country. People came from all over the country to buy enslaved Africans from the eastern shore. The reason why they chose that, because there were a lot of plantation. It was flat primarily because if the slaves ran, they could be caught easily, as opposed to, let's say, over in the mountains, definitely not, and even in the central area where the cities were. So the breeding of Africans took place on the eastern shore. One of my history professor when I was a student at Chicago was John O. Franklin, and one of the things that he used to tell us that I'd never forget, in 1640, there was three people who had escaped from slavery or indentured servitude in Virginia. Two of them were white and one was black. And they came to Maryland when they were trying to escape, because Virginia is the next state over. And they were caught in Maryland. And the two white guys were sentenced to an extra year of involuntary servitude. But John Punch, the black guy, was sentenced to a life of involuntary servitude. And Dr. Franklin used to tell us that was the first time in recorded American history that a distinction was made based on skin color. So John Punch, who was captured in Maryland and taken back to Virginia, was the first case that you see this discrimination based on skin color and in slavery ensuing out of that. We did some research with filmmaker John Burnett. We did a film on it, actually, on PBS, on Nat Turner. And when we were down in Southampton County, Virginia, there was a crossroads, and it was called, what's the name of that cross? Blackhead Crossroads. Blackhead Crossroads. And this is where Nat had his rebellion at. We talked to local black residents, and they said the reason why it was called Blackhead Crossroad, because after Nat Turner was captured, his body was dissected, which was very common in the 19th and even into the 20th century. And they decapitated him. And the whites put his head on this crossroads on a stake as an example, like Negro Mountain. And they left it there, and there's still rumors and legends that his skull is still in Southampton County by a white person whose ancestor was killed by Nat. And the initial name was not Blackhead Crossroads, it was called Niggerhead Crossroads, just like this mountain was called Nigger Mountain. So whites made monuments or examples. Whites would name places as examples of what would happen to you if you didn't obey us. And they're scattered throughout this state and other states around the country. Our children aren't being educated by the current educational system. I mean, that's why Malefi Asante's work is so important and the late Asa Hilliard's work is so important, because our students are failing because they're getting a curriculum that is absolutely irrelevant to who they are as black boys and girls in the school system. And so what I believe in, what the Warrior Method teaches, is that you teach culture before you teach curriculum. And we try to give our kids the so-called 3 R's: reading, writing, arithmetic, and I had the fourth one, which is racism. But we give them that, geography, math, science. They don't know who they are. See, if you give me a black kid that knows his culture, I can teach him anything. I can teach him anything. And that's why if you look at the history of our people, you look at Malcolm X, he came into prison, Malcolm Little, but he read and read and read until he understood who he was, and he left the prison Malcolm X. And so I think that our children don't know who they are. Black culture is the sum total of African artistic, intellectual, philosophical, and historical expressions. Black culture, when I say it, has to be linked with African culture. Just like American culture has to be linked with European culture. You can't, America still sees itself connected to Europe, and black people in this country don't see themselves oftentimes connected to Africa. And what I think that white supremacy does is dislocate us from who we are as African people. To me, as a psychologist, I can measure a black person's insanity by how far they are from who they are as an African person. I mean, and you can do that. And the further you are away, the crazier you are.